It began like many stories you've heard before. Someone convicted for a high-profile cybercrime, serving time, fading into the background of an overcrowded prison. But this one was different. This wasn't just another inmate trying to get attention. This was a man known only by his code name, Cypher, a convict who, over the years, began sending cryptic letters claiming he knew something about the government that could change the course of global power. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss out on interesting stories that dive deep into the world. We bring you these dark mysteries, one layer at a time, constructed with a mountain of research. Cypher's backstory was simple. In the early 2020s, he was arrested for running a massive cybercrime operation. The details were plastered all over the media, a sophisticated scheme involving stolen identities, digital currency, and encrypted transactions. He was thrown into a maximum security facility, just another inmate in a crowded system. But over time, something strange started happening. Cypher began sending out letters, not just to the media, but to government agencies, watchdogs, and even independent researchers. At first, they were dismissed as the ramblings of a convict, but Cypher wasn't just making wild claims. He was dropping codename after codename, operation names, and referencing locations that seemed almost too specific to be random. Some of the phrases he used could only have been known to people deeply involved in classified government operations. Then Cypher dropped his first bombshell, Phase Alpha. He said it was a plan to create widespread blackouts in multiple cities, coordinated digital attacks to disrupt the nation's infrastructure. At first, no one took it seriously. There were so many conspiracy theories circulating at the time, but Cypher's details started checking out. He mentioned cities like Chicago, Houston, and Phoenix, and predicted exact dates when these outages would occur. People thought it was just coincidence when those cities experienced unexpected blackouts in the summer of 2024. But the pattern was undeniable. Cypher's warnings had come true. And that's when things got even stranger. After the blackouts, Cypher stopped writing. No more letters, no more cryptic messages. It seemed like he'd vanished entirely. Some speculated he had been placed in solitary confinement. Others thought he might have been silenced permanently. Then, just when everyone thought the story was over, a mysterious file surfaced on the dark web. The file contained an audio recording, just under 10 minutes long. The voice on the tape? Cypher's. In the recording, Cypher spoke of something he called Phase 2. This wasn't about infrastructure anymore. It wasn't about taking down the power grid. No, Phase 2, he claimed, was much more insidious. It's not just about making people afraid, he said in a low whisper. It's about making them question reality. The goal isn't blackouts, it's confusion. It's chaos. It's making people doubt what's real, what's true. The voice in the tape sounded calm, eerily so, as if Cypher knew exactly what was coming. He mentioned that Phase 2 would involve a new wave of misinformation, a series of contradictory messages pushed out by mainstream sources, coupled with cyber attacks on information hubs that would scramble data across the country. Cypher wasn't just predicting technical failures anymore. He was predicting a mass psychological operation, one that would make the public wonder if they were being manipulated at the highest levels. Cypher's warnings continued. He said the next phase would involve double-blind operations, covert actions taken by agencies under the guise of being separate, but actually being linked together. You won't know who's pulling the strings, Cypher warned, and they want it that way. Within days, the recording went viral. People started asking questions. Was Cypher a prophet? Or had he simply figured out something that was already in motion? Either way, the impact was undeniable. His words were being shared everywhere, debated, analyzed. But no one could confirm where the information came from or who had released the recording. As 2024 drew to a close, more strange incidents unfolded. Government insiders, people close to the situation, started leaking that Cypher wasn't just another conspiracy theorist. Some believed he had been an unwitting participant in a covert government program, perhaps even used by an intelligence agency to feed disinformation. Others argued he was just a convict trying to manipulate the system for his own gain. Whatever the truth was, Cypher's cryptic warnings started to seem more and more real. Who was behind Cypher's sudden disappearance? Had he been silenced for revealing too much? Or was he still out there, pulling the strings from the shadows, waiting for the world to wake up to the truth? In the end, Cypher's fate remains uncertain. His warnings, however, are not. As society continues to experience disruptions in everything from politics to technology, some wonder if Cypher's predictions were just a prelude to something much bigger and much darker coming soon. As the year 2025 began, the ripple effect from Cypher's warnings was being felt all over the world. People who had brushed off the initial incidents, small glitches in the system, unexplained data losses, or strange outages, were now starting to see a bigger picture. Analysts began to piece together patterns that seemed too well orchestrated to be coincidence. In the wake of the blackouts, a series of government-backed research facilities were breached, their confidential projects suddenly exposed to the public. What was more alarming, though, was the sudden increase in coordinated misinformation. Major news outlets, once considered pillars of trust, were now caught in increasingly bizarre contradictions. One story might report a global cyber attack, while the next would claim it was nothing more than an unfortunate technical glitch. The public was left to wonder, was there a cover-up, or was the truth too dangerous to be known? As social media exploded with theories, one thing became clear: Cypher's warnings were not a matter of what if. They were a matter of when. Researchers, government officials, and independent groups all started conducting their own investigations, but access to sensitive information was becoming more restricted. Rumors swirled that Cypher had once had access to these classified files, and that's how he knew what was coming. If that was true, then the very institution that housed him, the prison system, had been compromised. People began to ask, how could a single convict, locked away in a high-security facility, have access to such high-level intelligence? The answers weren't easy to come by. Some speculated that Cypher had been a pawn in a larger game, used by shadowy organizations who'd seen him as a disposable asset. Others theorized that Cypher had been operating independently, his expertise and understanding of encryption and cyber systems making him a dangerous force to be reckoned with. At the same time, a small group of hackers, calling themselves the Resistance, took it upon themselves to investigate Cypher's claims. They started uncovering a hidden layer of government activity, one that had been carefully concealed for decades. There were files that hadn't been released to the public, blueprints of covert operations, and warnings buried within deep layers of classified documents. Each discovery seemed to align with Cypher's cryptic letters, leading the Resistance to believe that they weren't dealing with a single rogue inmate, but with a network of individuals who had been operating in the shadows for years. It wasn't long before the Resistance realized that their investigation was no longer just about proving Cypher's claims. It had become about preventing the next phase of the operation from happening. They started sending out encrypted messages, warning the public about what was coming, messages that were quickly censored by government watchdogs and media conglomerates. The Resistance's reach was limited, but the number of people questioning what was happening in the background began to grow. In the wake of Cypher's tapes, one thing was undeniable. People were waking up to the reality that the world they had trusted for so long might not be as secure as they thought. It wasn't just the blackouts or the misinformation that made people uneasy. It was the sudden realization that there might be powerful forces working behind the scenes, manipulating global events for their own gain. This wasn't just about national security anymore. It was about global control, about an unspoken war for power on a scale the public had never imagined. In the spring of 2025, things began to escalate. The Resistance launched a series of digital protests, large-scale hacktivism efforts that exposed government corruption, corporate misconduct, and data manipulation. These protests were not only a way for the public to voice their concerns, but also served as a test of Cypher's theory. The more they dug into the information, the more they realized that Cypher had been right all along. There were people at the highest levels of power orchestrating these events. As summer approached, the world began to feel the full weight of Cypher's warnings. Rumors spread that Phase 2 was already in motion. Some claimed that a series of covert digital weapons were being used to target critical infrastructure worldwide, while others believed that the events that Cypher had foreseen were merely the beginning of something far more sinister. The more questions that were asked, the more the media stayed silent. And the more silence there was, the louder the voices of those who had uncovered the truth grew. Some believed that Cypher, or the people behind him, had already infiltrated systems that no one knew existed. It wasn't just about hacking into government databases anymore. It was about manipulating the very infrastructure that society relied on. Digital currencies were being destabilized. Stock markets began to show signs of unpredictable fluctuations. Trust in global communication networks began to erode. What became even more unsettling was the growing number of strange, unexplained disappearances. These weren't the usual suspects, politicians, journalists, or activists. These were ordinary citizens, people who had just started asking questions about the true nature of the world around them. Families, friends, and colleagues would report these individuals as missing, only to find that their online presence had been wiped clean. Their social media profiles disappeared. Their financial histories were erased. It was as if they had never existed. Was this the next phase of Cypher's plan? Or had he warned of something bigger that was already in progress? Was it possible that those who had uncovered the truth were being silenced by the very forces Cypher had tried to expose? By beginning 2025, there was one undeniable truth. The world was changing. There were those who had taken Cypher's warnings seriously and those who had dismissed them as fantasy. But as the digital warfare escalated and the psychological manipulation became more apparent, the question remained: who was controlling the narrative? Amidst the growing chaos, some wondered if Cypher had predicted this too. Had he seen the cracks in society long before anyone else had? Had he known that the greatest threat wasn't just a cyber attack or global conspiracy, but the erosion of trust itself? As Cypher's theories began to take shape in the public's mind, there was an increasing sense of urgency. What Cypher had warned about was no longer just the domain of a few rogue individuals, it was a global phenomenon. What had started as an isolated prison story had now grown into something far more profound. People everywhere began looking for the truth, asking questions, challenging authority, and connecting the dots. Some began to wonder if Cypher was more than just a man. Was he the figurehead of a larger movement, a symbol of resistance against the powers that be? Or was he simply a messenger, sending out a warning that no one was prepared to hear? It became clear that Cypher wasn't done with the world yet. Whether he was still alive, still locked away in a cell, or working in the shadows, his influence was undeniable. His warning had set the world on a new trajectory, and no one could predict where it would lead. The coming years would reveal more secrets, more lies, and more dangerous truths. And perhaps, just perhaps, the only thing people could trust was that nothing would ever be the same again. Remember, we bring these stories to light because it's important to question what we see, what we hear, and what we're told. If you want to stay updated on stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next mystery that could change everything.